Ashley was happy, they were happy. 1 month after they married, they fell pregnant with their first child. And the following summer, Kennard was actually deployed on his first tour in Afghanistan, so he would be gone for several months, and Ashley gave birth to their child alone. I can't find any information as to where they lived at this time. However, what we do know is that Ashley moved back to Virginia to be close to her family and friends with baby, whilst Kennard was in Afghanistan. At this point, Ashley admits to having had a short-lived short-lived relationship with a male friend of hers who she knew back from her hometown. However, this amounted to nothing, and there isn't really much information about who he is or anything more. We don't know anything apart from the fact that this short fling of a relationship occurred between the two of them whilst Kennard was away. When Kennard returned from his tour, it was clear that he wasn't okay. He reportedly just wasn't the same as the man who had left so many months previous, and he showed some clear signs of suffering with PTSD. He would get very upset if any loud noises went off around him, and any flashing lights would also set him off, so he was not well. At this point, Kennard actually slept with a gun under his bed. He also, interestingly and a bit randomly, told Ashley that if she was ever to get pregnant from another man, he would kill her. So keep that in mind as the case goes on. The abuse worsened, so Ashley claims that Kennard again was still abusing her, and that he would often grab and hit her and push her around. Kennard admits to only having hit her once in retaliation to her having hit him first. He completely denies ever being abusive towards his Interestingly, Kennard he claims he had absolutely no knowledge of this pregnancy. Now keep in mind, Ashley is bringing a child to full term. She's pretty much 9 months pregnant at this point. And Kennard has confirmed that they had sex up until pretty much the point that she gave birth. So one of the big topics around the defence for Ashley was that how on earth can you not know that your wife is 9 months pregnant when you are regularly seeing her and her body and touching her? But Kennard claims he maintains he had no idea, and she hid it very well. So in the early hours of October 15th, could have been October 14th by that point, Kennard actually left the house late at night to pick up his aunt, uncle and their family, who were also being posted to Alaska at the time. So I think their plane was landing at around 11:30, 11 p.m. Kennard was gone for a total of 3.5 hours, and during this time it is alleged that Ashley Ard went into labour, gave birth to the baby, took the baby to the park and returned home. So, I mean, as soon as I heard that, I'm not passing judgment here, or I do not claim to know what happened, but that is an achievement in itself. If somebody is able to do that, even in a quick labour, if nothing goes wrong, to put yourself together and drive a baby and then get back home before your husband even notices, I don't know. During the labour, Ashley lost more than half of the entire blood within her body. She lost more than 5 times the amount of blood that would normally be lost in labour, during labour. Despite this, police proceeded to question Ashley just 2 hours after she had been admitted to the hospital. So I'm just going to read this out because I don't want to get it wrong. There is audio there are audio records on YouTube if you want to listen to them, of a police lady going into Ashley's room in the hospital, and she says, "We found the baby today." And Ashley says, "What baby?" And the police lady says, "The baby that you gave birth to today." And Ashley replies, "I didn't give birth to a baby. I don't know her." But listening to the audio, she sounds confused. She sounds genuinely confused by what is being said to her. It is worth noting at this point that the bathroom in Ashley's home looked like a horror scene. She'd lost more than half of the blood from her body. There was blood on every surface, on the walls, on the doors, on the floor. They looked like there had been an attempt at cleaning up, but there was just blood everywhere. And it is argued that after losing so much blood and being in the condition that Ashley was in at the time, ways, many alternatives to the situation, to how the situation could have ended if she really didn't want the baby, to what actually happened to the baby. So some additional evidence to add to the list, and this is some evidence that was actually used in her trial. A bystander or somebody, we don't know who, the identity was never released, but someone was walking by the park in the early hours of that morning, and they went to the store. I had no knowledge of anything. And she actually, she didn't say so, but she has doubts as to what happened. You can tell she's not really sure about what happened that night, and she claims he has completely cut her off since. They were very close, and now he just doesn't talk to her at all. He's moved states, he has nothing to do with them. And on another note, and a final note, Ashley eventually confessed whilst in prison. She is on tape confessing to the crime. She very clearly and very calmly states that she couldn't confess it or say what she's about to say up until this point. And she says that she remembers everything. She gave birth to the child. She quickly cleaned herself up, wrapped her up in a blanket and placed her on the bed. She then picked the child up after getting redressed, got her in the car, and that whole time she was thinking that somebody would find her and take care of her, but that someone couldn't be her for all of the reasons that we know about. And she placed her on the ground in the park with good intentions that somebody would hear her or discover her and take her home and take care of her. And that was her confession. Obviously, the baby was a newborn baby. She was placed in a park in Alaska in the middle of the night in just a blanket. She had no chance of survival at all, and very, very, very slim to nil chance of being discovered at that time. Nobody was around, so and the interviewer at the time very clearly questioned Ashley and said, did you do it alone or did Kennard have some involvement? And she very quickly said no, Kennard had absolutely no involvement. He didn't know I did it all. And that's it. That's the end of the case. Theories are either she did it or Kennard did it or they both did it. Having watched a documentary and read through the very limited information that is out there on the case, I personally don't think that he didn't know, and I think that is very probable that he got home, saw what was happening, grabbed the baby and took it back out. Hence the CCTV and the missing time. I just struggle to believe that. I mean, adrenaline does wonderful things. If you're in fear or for your life or you're panicked, could somebody pull themselves together, drive and get back home and clean up and then without anybody noticing? I just don't. In 3.5 hours, I struggle to believe that is what happened. Many believe that she is was also in breach of her bail conditions. She was supposed to be in her mother's company at all times. Yet she managed to get pregnant, get married, date someone, give birth to a new baby, and still at this point no idea what the other baby, the original, their firstborn was. So yeah, I'll leave this one here. I decided to do this case because I saw a documentary on it, and the twists throughout were just, I don't know. The one thing we do know is that an infant, a newborn baby, died that night, and somebody must be held accountable for that. That's murder. It's more of a case of who actually did it, who was involved,